Welcome everyone to the 2022, the first 2022 Agency Online Exchange. My name is Shar Graff and I work for Second Harvest Heartland Food Bank as an agency partner specialist, and I work in the outstate of our service area covering Southwest and Central Minnesota. And we had several colleagues from Second Harvest here today to help facilitate the breakout sessions that we'll be doing. So I'd encourage everyone to put your name and your agency in the chat. And then, so everyone knows who's here. And if you want to rename the name that goes with your picture, I see Megan put some instructions in the chat, but you can go up to hover over your picture and go to the 3 dots. And then way at the bottom, it says rename, and you can put a different name. You can put your name and your agency instead of whatever's there now if you want. Looks like a lot of you have already done that. If you want to participate in the conversation, you can put your comment in the chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask your question. Today, we've decided that we want to invite you to help us to plan the topics and speakers for 2022. And so we're going to be breaking out into groups and brainstorming some topics that would be relevant for you this year so that we can get it set up and we can start contacting people for speakers or facilitators or presenters. We did schedule, because it came up in conversation, that the compliance specialists who go out into the field and make the site visits to help agencies stay in compliance with all the different programming that we use. They found that there's some questions about sharing the food that comes to you from Second Harvest. And so for the February 24th Agency Online Exchange, we're going to have the compliance specialists from Second Harvest talk about how to legally share Second Harvest food with other agencies. So stay tuned for that. So we have February filled, but we have the rest of the year to talk about yet. Let's see. So before we go into that, there was a topic that came up that Lisa Boyd has been hearing from her service area, and she would like to talk about that a little bit. So Lisa, if you want to take it.
Sure. Thanks, Shar. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our first Agency Online Exchange. So I've heard from a number of the agency partners that I work with that they have concerns about fundraising since we're now through the second year of the pandemic into the third. You may be hearing rumors about ARPA funding that may be coming into the state or is already in the state that may be allocated for hunger relief. But in the meantime, something that's come up is, how do you fundraise while we're still in the pandemic, even though some of your sources of funding may have dried up, or it's hard to figure out where the new funds are coming from or where the grants are available? And what I wanted to ask the group today, since we're going to be talking about all kinds of topics that you might want to discuss in this forum, I wanted to find out if the topic of fundraising, either generally or how to fundraise when we're still in a pandemic or you're trying to rebuild from a pandemic, if you would want to have that as a topic of discussion, if you'd like some specialized training around that, if you'd like to have a webinar. I just wanted to hear from people in this group what your interest was. So with that, I'm going to shut up and let y'all respond. And again, if you want to put comments or questions or ideas in the chat, please go ahead. So Andy says he thinks, sorry, a webinar would be great. Paula says fundraising training is always helpful. So do you think that's something you'd want to discuss in this forum, or if we did a webinar, would it be a separate event? Alana says separate, please. Thanks, Alana. Great, we're getting some good comments in the chat. Thanks, everyone. So last question around this is, does anyone in this group have any recommendations for who to have as a panelist on a separate webinar? Have you been into any trainings or conferences or networking meetings where somebody was talking about this and you just really liked what they had to say? So Francisco is suggesting Propel for nonprofits. Thanks, Francisco. Maybe Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. I like that suggestion. Thanks, Alana.
I did see an email come through, Lisa, that where they had the MACC had a webinar on fundraising in a persistent pandemic, and Jen Urban from Legal for Good Contact, or Attorney for Nonprofits, Legal for Good. She presented, so maybe we could look into that too.
Great. Shar, if you wouldn't mind putting that into the chat, then we can save that record along with this meeting, and we'll have that in writing. I think that sounds like a great suggestion. Thanks. All right, well, thanks everyone for your ideas on that. It does sound like there's definitely some interest in Second Harvest doing a webinar on that topic. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Shar.
Okay. All right. So as I said, what we planned to do today was to break out into smaller groups so that we can have some more intimate conversation about, you know, what's on your mind as far as the year ahead, and what are some of the sticking points, and where are you getting stuck, and you know, what are you thinking you might need for more information for the coming year. And so we're going to break into small groups. And then each group is going to come up with 5 topics. And you'll have a Second Harvest staff person there to take notes. And then we'll come back as a large group again to share back, you know, some of the favorite things that came up during the conversation. And we'll keep a record of all of the suggestions and the suggestions for speakers or facilitators or panelists that you come up with. We'll probably spend, I'm thinking maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, depending on how much you talk. And then we'll come back. Let's say, Jennifer, 15 minutes. And if people run out of things to talk about, they can talk about other things in their small group until we come back. So I think what will happen is that you'll see something come up that says you're invited to join a breakout group, and then click on join, and it will enter you into a breakout group. See you there. Time's a charm. Welcome back, everyone. And I think we'll spend about the next 10 minutes talking about what topics came up in your breakout group. And if any speakers, maybe that will, from someone who wasn't in your breakout group, maybe we'll get some input for ideas about speakers. And if you feel that you have expertise in a certain area, it's always fun to have a panel of agencies present as well. So if any of these topics you feel like you could, make a contribution about, because everyone has their, their things that they're good at their food shelf. So let us know, and we'll put you on the list, and then contact you when we're ready to put that topic on the docket. So let's just, you can unmute yourself or raise your hand, or put in the chat the favorite items that came up in your small group. Anyone want to go first?
I can go first, Shar. I'll put all of mine in the chat, but I think one of the ones that I heard quite loud and clear was both the expansion of like a space for a food shelf and how to tackle that, but also a capital campaign to raise money for how do you fundraise for the expansion or moving to a larger space for a food shelf. That seemed like something that multiple people have gone through, but also that multiple people really want to learn more about.
Yeah, and I think we do have some experts out there on that topic, because I know in Southwest and Central Minnesota, people have been, moving into different spaces, larger spaces, and they've also been a lot of them have been remodeling their spaces. So if you have done that, put your name in the chat and put a little blurb about what your experience has been, so that we know you can be a good person to have on a panel. Okay, Anissa.
Yeah, I just tossed it in the chat there, but our group is interested in learning more about outreach from their agency partner collaborators, as well as volunteer outreach. Tips on sourcing products to kind of fill the gaps when they're waiting for that second harvest delivery and they run out of like fresh goods like milk and produce. Just compliance updates in general, and specifically related to TFAB updates. Maybe another like produce webinar, tips for storing and managing an abundance of produce in peak season, to make sure it lasts and reaches a lot of folks. We had a little bit of discussion of our Facebook page, and I tossed that link out there too, but better utilizing the Facebook page as like a resource for getting information out, as well as potentially like Google Text or a blog or just other ideas about, you know, how Second Harvest gets information out to agency partners. Had a short discussion about winter weather policies and like closure policies. And I think that was about it.
Yeah, we should mention too that the state is keeping track of closures due to COVID. So if you do close, please let us know, because we need to put it on a list that the state gives to the governor each month. So please let us know.
Shar, when you say closures, do you mean due to like COVID outbreaks, or do you mean like a closure of in-person services to the public?
Closing the food shelf completely because of COVID. Yeah. So they want to know when it closed and when it opened back up.
Sure, our group had a suggestion to talk about TFAP availability, and they said if we could talk about that ASAP, because that's something food shelves are facing right now. So maybe for March, and I'm thinking somebody like maybe even Courtney from DHS could present.
Yeah, one of the things my group suggested was a Q&A with, we talked about at least, was a Q&A with TFAP as well.
I think we did that last year, didn't we? Seems like it. Maybe that was COVID TFAP procedures, intake, and that sort of thing. That'd be a good topic. Anybody else have a good topic that your group discussed?
Yeah, I posted all the things our group discussed in the chat, and just a couple I want to highlight. And if any of my fellow group members feel I left anything out, please let me know. But DEI was the first thing that was mentioned, which is great because I think we can always do better at that. And then specifically serving non-English speakers, especially those who may not even be able to read in their home language. That's a great topic discussion that I think we could explore more.
Thanks, Ian.
Hi, Char. So the group that I was with, we did discuss getting more details about TFAP and the requirements for that. And then overall attendance, or kind of the state of like where people are at with, if you're in person, if you're making appointments, that kind of thing. And then another topic that's kind of has to do with our programs. So like SNAP, Minnesota Central Kitchen, CSFP, specifically how to maybe outreach to get more clients. So CSFP/NAPS, and then food rescue, discussing the Best Buy dates and like the discrepancy in what is the extension versus the rule, I guess.
And we did that last year too, I think. We talked about that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know if we could do like a wrapping up of some of the programs as like one session. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just clarify, because we did, Shar, do a whole thing on dates and stuff. I'm speaking more specifically to, we just recently got some information from Second Harvest Heartland from our food rescue end that has conflicting directions on Best Buy, Sell By, what dates and what's out there. And it conflicts with TFAPs and conflicts with Food Keeper and some other things. So we're looking for clarification on that.
Okay.
Hi, Sue. This is Song. I'm going to turn my... So, Sue, I spoke with Nikki from your food shelf about those guidelines that you just spoke of, you just mentioned. And the clarification that I gave her was that the TFAP dates were specifically, I think we're talking about eggs. So those were for packing dates, not best by dates. And the sorting guidelines that we just sent out, they were more in line with the messaging that we give to our donor partners. So, and the food keeper, you know, this is all very confusing, but the food keeper dating is actually for like when you can eat that. So these are all, you know, because we're talking about sorting guidelines for when you get the food rescue from the store. So that was inconsistent with what we tell the donor partners. But the food keeper dating is for basically when you have the food, like when can you eat this by? So that's a different dating guideline. So, but yeah, please reach out to your food specialist.
Yeah, I think it continues to be confusing for people because I think we have, you know, people sorting. And so, yeah, whatever the donors are doing, we have it here, we're putting it on the shelf. And we have real specific guidelines that we've been following. And I think the panic came when that came out that they don't jive necessarily. And I believe it was more than just eggs, but we can have a separate conversation if others are very fine with it. I just, for us, we do a very large food rescue. So we have to have that clear. So that's all.
For sure.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people that do food rescue. So that might be a good, you know, kind of focus on the food rescue part of it.
That's what I was just thinking, Shar. The fact that Sue and Song are having this conversation already right here makes me think it could be a really good idea to dedicate a whole online exchange session to that conversation, especially for agency partners who are doing food rescue at any level. How do you balance the guidance from the USDA and the food keeper with our best guidance that we're getting from Feeding America around food safety, with the sorting guidelines that our food rescue team has very helpfully put together? There is a lot of conflicting information out there. And as some folks may know, for me, it becomes a very political issue around food justice and food waste, and how a fair amount of that is baked into the whole system. So I always want to talk about that side of it.
And I think it would be a good opportunity for us to look at some of the wonderful new resources that the food rescue team have put together for food shelves who are doing food rescue, that makes it really clear and accessible to volunteers who are doing sorting about what the dates are that they should be looking at. I think it's awesome that they've been able to do that. And I think it's really great that it's now available to us. So I think that this would be a good opportunity for them to even walk through that. Like, here are the resources now, so that everyone can look in the wall and see, here's what we can be sorting, here's what we can be, you know, throwing away, and we can lessen the confusion just a little bit, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Anything else that anyone wants to share for topics that maybe you just thought of as we were talking about something different? Maybe you could put in the chat everybody put in the chat what topics would be most interesting for you to hear about. So maybe put 3 in the chat that you heard that might be, you know, might be something you really would want to catch. And then we'll disseminate this information and put it in a list for you, just so that, especially for people that weren't able to be with us today, to look at the topics that were brought up, and maybe they'd want to add to those. Um, and then in the next email that comes out from Second Harvest to remind you about the February agency online exchange, we'll send that, put the list in the email so that everyone can see that. Okay, before we move on to the next thing, we have about 20 minutes left. Any other questions or comments or ideas that you wanted to share before we move on?
Sure, I just wanted to highlight one that I've seen come up in the chat a number of times, is definitely handling and respectfully welcoming clients that are non-English speakers, and also how do we find resources that are able to do translation, you know, doing wayfinding so that people know where to go and can understand, whether in their own language or in, you know, not using, but using cues that are visual cues of, like, you know, what they should be doing, where they can be going, how much they can, you know, product they can take, things like that. I think is going to be really an important conversation to have as we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and as we think about trying to do outreach to a number of different communities. So that's something I just have seen a number of times that I wanted to make sure I said out loud.
Okay. Is there any agency out there that, you know, that has some good techniques that they use that we could tap for panels? Be nice to get a panel of maybe 3 or 4 agencies that talk about what they do.
Oh, and Sue brought up a good point of funding for on-site interpreters. I think that that's something I haven't really seen brought up in a lot of grant proposals that I think would be a wonderful thing for us to explore. Mm-hmm. And I would also add that I think Pillsbury United Communities Weight House does a good job of making like a color-coded system for their communities that they're serving. So that's at least one that I know.
Anyone else have any good policies or procedures that you use for non-English speakers to help them feel welcome?
This is Michelle from the Friends in Need Food Shelf, and we have a color code system as well. Each family is assigned a color according to the number of people in their family, and then when they go through the shopping area, they just look up, and if they're a pink, they have a number next to it, and that tells them how much they can take from that area. If it's, you know, we've got colors that worked with people who are colorblind too. So we were trying to make it as simple as we possibly could. And it's worked very well for us for the last 5 years.
Thank you, Michelle.
In Pipestone, we have a color-coded system, and we have a two-sided sheet that each client is given when they register. And one side is English and one side is Spanish, which helps. And then we recently actually had one of our clients become a volunteer, and she interprets for us every week. It has been a godsend.
Awesome.
But if she's not there, it's a struggle. Then we use the smartphone, so.
Anyone else?
We've tried to help equip our volunteers as much as possible with like cheat sheet guides. We have a lot of Spanish speakers, so just how to say simple phrases, how to say numbers, and then trying to make all the signage bilingual so that they can start to learn vocabulary. And that's been helpful, and a lot of them have been kind of excited to learn more. So that's been and what we found is sometimes our Spanish speakers will then in turn try to teach English to, like, it's kind of this mutual opportunity to learn, which has been really fun to see.
Thanks.
This is Jamie with Good in the Hood. Some of our sites, because of where we're located, have interpreters on site that are able to speak the languages of the clients that they serve in their area. You know, we are looking at, you know, trying to look at other things like, you know, whether it's interpretive programs where we can speak into it and then it can speak into the mother language, speak back the mother language of some of the clients that we're serving, those sorts of things. But we're fortunate enough to be able to have at some of our sites, certainly those that speak the mother language of the communities that they serve.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. All right, I wrote down all of your names, so so you might be getting a call. Anything else that anyone want to bring up before we move on? So we thought that because volunteers is such a huge topic for us, we might just talk about, you know, what are our best practices as far as using volunteers. How do you recruit volunteers? I know in our group we had a discussion about how to find those, you know, where to advertise, or how do you find those people that have time on their hands. How to find the younger people who are more able to do some of the strenuous work. And then, do you do background checks? Do you use clients as volunteers? Have you had any experience with firing a volunteer? And so we thought we'd just talk a little bit about volunteers and just have a conversation for, looks like we have about 10 minutes left. So let's spend the last 10 minutes talking about volunteers in general. Maybe we could talk about recruitment first. You know, does anyone have a good practice of recruiting, and maybe recruiting a definite sector that you found successful?
Sure. I'm just really curious to hear how people are managing this during the pandemic, because again, I've been hearing a lot about how challenging it's been to find volunteers during the pandemic. So what strategies are folks using to keep their volunteer numbers up?
Mm-hmm.
This is Michelle at Friends in Need again. We have taken to advertising on our Facebook page for specific jobs. And that way we can tell them on Thursdays at 2 o'clock, we need organics recyclers. And on Mondays at 12 o'clock, we need sorters for when the rescue trucks come in. And that has gotten us some really good new people that we might not have found without trying it that way. And a lot of our volunteers come through connections with current volunteers who have been here, and they bring in their neighbors and friends when they retire. So that's kind of how we have found the ones we need.
So kind of short, specific volunteer needs that aren't necessarily long 2-hour projects and not recurring, just come and help, just kind of on the spot.
No, it is more for the recurring ones. It's letting them know that on Thursdays at this time, we're doing organics recycling. If you want to come every Thursday to do that, it is for specific jobs. We did that for our pet food volunteers, and we got 2 people who could come after work and work on all of our pet food. And they're there every week taking care of that thing. So we found that being specific about what their job would be helps.
Okay, thanks, Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we've done out in Delano is develop some relationships with our local churches. I mean, we're not a church-based organization, but we've developed some relationships where they will take a month and find the volunteers for us for our food distribution for that month. So, you know, we distribute food once a week. So we're a much smaller organization. This probably works better when that's what you are. But then they know that every year in January, and most of them sign up for more than 1 month, you know, they know every year in January, they're going to find a group of volunteers for each week of January. And that does bring in then some new folks on occasion, and that will do other volunteering, but it also lets us know that we have, you know, we've kind of outsourced it a little bit.
Oh, okay, sure. Thanks, Joel.
Anoka County has a program called RSVP. It's Retired Senior and Volunteer Program. And we have received some excellent volunteers from there, and they are screened before they come. Most of our volunteers come from a friend inviting them.
Okay.
I just threw this in the chat, and I have been wondering this. I love what Joel from Delano mentioned about partnering with the church, and I wonder if there's another way to do something similar and like leverage our power as like Second Harvest to do that with like corporations, where like corporations will give, you know, their employees time to go volunteer at Second Harvest and do like a repack or why not. So is there similar ability to help like send those resources out into like food shelf communities? And like I feel it's wow, I'm stumbling over my words, I'm sorry. Like Cappy had a produce distribution over the summer, and they had I don't remember who it was, but it was like a corporation. They had a bunch of volunteers that day that were helping put on the distribution.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Does anybody use local businesses who come in periodically and volunteer?
This is Alana at the Candy County Food Shelf. I have a new board member that is the corporate here at Genio. And I was telling the board that we were needing volunteers specifically to like unpack the truck when it comes from Second Harvest and, you know, date the things and put them on the shelves. And they jumped at that opportunity. So they're bringing 5 to 6 people every truck to put the refrigerated frozen stuff away and the canned goods away. And it's their way of doing team building, because after that, then they'll go out for a lunch as a team. So it's amazing. We also partner with Dream Academy. It's a charter school here in town. Those kids love to get out and do a little bit of, you know, they're here for maybe 1 or 2 hours, but they love to get out of school and help the community. And then we also have a Wilmer Warhawks. It's like kind of like your high school or your college kids playing hockey, but they want to be pros. They actually have been coming too prior to Genio and helping put away the trucks as well for their community service to give back to.
That is neat. I like it. Anybody else have?
The Hometown Bank in Olivia sends 2 people every other Tuesday to help us with our truck.
Oh, great.
I wonder if anybody has any volunteer related questions that you want to ask your peer group. You know, a topic that came up in our small group discussion was, how do you manage the availability of your volunteers with your food shelf hours?
With Good in the Hood, we have partnered in a way. There's several local junior highs and high schools, or there's a lot of colleges. We're offering student learning opportunities that send actually quite a few volunteers to several of our various sites. And so that may be a venue to be able to connect with local colleges, local schools, who really are looking for, on a pretty regular basis, volunteer opportunities for their students. We do utilize that a fair amount.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it. I think Andy mentioned that in St. Peter, they tap into their college system there too. And I know I've heard, you know, tapping into the Honor Society, for example, at a school, because they have to put so many hours in, and a lot of church youth groups, you have to get so many hours of volunteering in. It's just finding out who they are and asking, you know, and then setting it up. All right, well, we're just about at time, so I think I'll wrap things up and just remind you that the next Agency Online Exchange is Thursday, February 24th, again from 1 to 2, and we're going to be talking about sharing Second Harvest Heartland food. And then we'll probably get on the TFAP topic fairly quickly so that we can get them to join us in March. But we'll send you out the reminder with the list of topics that we came up with today for our February Agency Online Exchange. Anything before we part? Thanks for joining us today. It was a great group today, you guys. Thanks for joining the conversation. See you next month.